Oppression is oppression. And unless we're all free, none of us are free. And that's the thing. It's just a matter of having the illusion of peace, which is what I explain to people about that think, oh, it was October 7th, that everything was peaceful before that. I'm like, yes, on your side of the fence. On your side of the fence, it appeared you had the illusion of a peace, but there's never real peace without real justice.
Yeah. Over 200 Palestinians were killed between January 1st and October 6th of 2023. It was one of the deadliest.
I heard it was over 700.
Wow. Yeah. So it's probably even higher. And, you know, Palestinian deaths are always undercounted, but these last couple of years have been some of the deadliest years for Palestinians. And so to decide to start history on October 7th, you know, is similar to the Israeli project trying to start history in 1948, right? Or in 1967, or wherever else is convenient to erase Palestinian reality.
Yeah.
I think there are certain elements of left movements that I think over dramatize or overblow certain elements of social constructs, especially when they talk about white supremacy and what that really means. I do think that people need to fully understand, if they don't already, that the Zionist ideology is a full-blown colonizing white supremacist ideology, full stop. Like, this is not even up for debate. And for those of you who may be in the dark about this interview that was done by the BBC the other day, it was interviewing an actual Zionist living in occupied territory, because that's what it is. This has been making the rounds, and this will give you an idea of exactly how perverted and sick the Zionist ideology truly is. Here we go.
Hear of you coming from America to here, settling in potentially in Gaza, kicking Palestinians out. A lot of people would see that as settler colonialism.
It's not really colonialism, it's a return. My grandparents were kicked out of Israel by Arabs who were trying to establish a Palestinian state, and they had to leave for their survival, and I'm just coming back and fulfilling their dream.
Okay, her grandparents weren't kicked out of there. I don't know where they were kicked out of, but her grandparents were not. They might have been kicked out of Norway or so. I don't know. What do you think? Because they were definitely not. First of all, Arabs didn't kick the Jews out of that area. The other Arab nations did kick the Jews out to help facilitate the Zionist state at the same time that the Zionists expelled the Palestinians. That happened.
Can I just point out?
She's crazy.
Can I just point out there's a reason why Israel has the highest rate of skin cancer in the entire world.
Oh, case in point right here. Talk about your ancestors.
Just putting that out there. Eman, please share your thoughts.
Well, I think that we see this pattern over and over of Zionists. Basically, you know, we often say every Zionist accusation is a confession, right? That there's often this sense of like basically flipping history backwards. So, you know, when Zionists occupied, for example, the city of Lid, right? They refer to it as the liberation of Lid, but it was actually an occupation of it and a large massacre of its Arab population and an expulsion of thousands of that, and you know, thousands upon thousands of its residents. But this is referred to as a liberation, and so it's an attempt to erase Palestinian history and to effectively kind of flip the narrative, right? To say, well, we are the invaders, right? Even though like my grandparents, their parents, their parents, their parents, their parents, as far back as anyone has any record, have lived on this land, right? To pose us as Palestinians as the actual occupiers. It's part and parcel of this campaign of gaslighting that's really key to Zionism, right? That it's not just it's not just the occupation and the ethnic cleansing. It's also the kind of the psychological warfare of saying none of what has happened to you has really happened, and none of what's happening now is actually happening. You're making it all up. The death toll is wrong. Actually, it wasn't us bombing the hospital. You bombed it yourself. You know, like this has been Zionist playbook since the very beginning. And I would say if anyone doubts the settler colonial nature of Zionism, the first thing you should do is go read the founding fathers of Zionism. I mean, go read Theodore Herzl. They go read these early documents. They're widely available, and they name their project as one of settlement and colonization, and specifically of bringing Western and white civilization to a sort of savage native place that, and to an indigenous population that's fundamentally disposable. You don't need to even read a Palestinian side of it to believe that, because you can just read the Zionists themselves.
Yeah, no, they flat out acknowledged they had to ethnically cleanse. There was no secret about it. Like, they knew they were going to have to ethnically cleanse. I would like to point out, just in general, like as a hint, as a tip to people when you're deciphering Zionist propaganda, anybody who says the Arabs did this or the Arabs did that, anybody that refers to the people as the Arabs is viewing a Zionist talking point. And it just totally, completely shows their ignorance. I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, it's a level of bigotry that is pretty evident. And I would say probably the most disturbing thing about this clip so far is hearing the little kids in the background, because they're being indoctrinated every day.
Oh,
that
yes, we were.
And just putting that right in there. So we'll continue.
That would be the first thing. The second thing is,
share your thoughts.
Potentially in Gaza, kicking Palestinians out.
It's not really colonialism, it's a return. My grandparents were kicked out of Israel by Arabs who were trying to establish a Palestinian state, and they had to leave for their survival, and I'm just coming back and fulfilling their dream. That would be the first thing. The second thing is, I think that, and I know this is a minority view, I think colonialism gets a bad rap. Like, genocide is bad, but colonizing places that are genocidal and they have bad ideology, it's good to come in and correct their views.
That's pretty funny, because they are the same thing. I'm sorry. I mean, listen, we can look at our history.
I mean, genocide is bad, but going in and correcting them, that's okay.
Yeah, so we colonized we colonized the Native American population, and we genocided them. And I've been saying for a long time that what is being done by Israel to the Palestinian people is akin to the Trail of Tears. Like, it's that simple. This is not hyperbolic. It's basically the same thing. And the idea that they can talk their way out of this by suggesting that, colonizing isn't so bad. We just want to make them like us. But it's so obvious that there is this white supremacist, colonizing mindset. And they're so flippant about it. They're like, we kill a few people. Not a big deal.
Let this finish so we can be done with this woman.
What do you think should happen to the people who are already in Gaza?
So I think that there's a couple of possibilities. The one that I think is the most realistic is we got to ask other countries for help. I know that Spain was willing to take a couple of million. I know Russia said they would take a couple of thousand.
To a lot of people, that would sound like you're advocating for ethnic cleansing?
I don't think so, because Palestinian isn't an ethnicity.
There it is. There it is. Palestinians, that's not a real thing. How long have you been saying that?
I told you that's what we're taught. It's so unbelievable. Hence the use of the term Arabs.
Yeah, Palestine. That's not a real thing. They just made that up.
But I love how she has this warped sense of history that her grandparents were kicked out by Arabs who were trying to establish a Palestinian state. When did that happen?
Well, I mean, you gotta, whatever helps you sleep at night.
When was that segment? I didn't get that.
I want to point out that this goes back to what we were talking about with the pinkwashing, right? It's this idea like these people aren't good people. They're not deserving humans. They're not real humans, right? And so to wipe them out is okay because they're bad, right? They're people who don't believe in queer. The U.S. is a deeply homophobic society. There are multiple states in this country that are erasing trans and queer rights. Do I think that those places should be ethnically cleansed or genocided because people's ideologies are terrible? No, absolutely not. Of course not, right? You would only think that that's a reasonable thing if you accept a certain dehumanization, right, of these people, right? They're not...
It's just amazing. Yeah. She says it. Wait, she's about to say that it's an ideology. Yeah. I want her to tell me how Palestinian is an ideology. Judaism, however, is an ethnicity, but Palestinian is an ideology.
Yeah.
Ideology, and it's an ideology that says that they want Jews dead, and so we want them as far away from Jews as possible.
First of all, let me tell you that my grandmother would have said this shiksa is not this shiksa does not look like, yeah, that's what my grandmother would have referred to her as a shiksa. I'm just saying.
Well,
But
just because she happens to be,
she looks Aryan. She looks Aryan.
Oh, you know, I mean,
she does not look anywhere near native to the Mediterranean area.
Eman, you know who she reminds me of? If you remember that video in Brooklyn where you had that blonde lady who went up to all of the Hasidic Jews that were standing with the Palestinians and waving the Palestinian flag. You're a Jew! Oh, dude, you're not a real Jew! Oh, damn you! It's like,
It's
my
terrible.
God! And they're so fragile. They are so fragile and they're so privileged. I
This
like
lady.
piercing that bubble because they really should live in reality.
I feel bad for her kids.
I feel bad for the kids, yeah, because they didn't choose this. This is what they're being
I
brought
just
up
feel
into.
bad. Yeah.
And the one thing I will say, Eman, is that obviously living in Chicago, you know, Illinois is a very unique state in that it's basically Chicago and then it's this very rural farmland type state, very conservative in a lot of ways. But what I have experienced is that when you talk about taking away rights and things like that, it's actually not as popular as people perceive it to be. In fact, here in Florida right now, Amendment 4, women's reproductive freedom, is polling at 70%. This is Florida. This is like real Trump country, very conservative. But at the same time, a lot of conservatives hate the Democrats, but they like civil liberties. Like they actually do have principles and they believe in that. They're like, well, listen, I may be pro-life, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. That's not, you know, that doesn't make any sense. And so these institutions that are so well-funded and so insanely powerful, like AIPAC, they basically thwart the will of the people. And one of the biggest reasons they're able to get away with it is because voter turnout in this country is abysmally bad. I think that in a lot of ways speaks to why people like this woman can go out there and just say, oh, yeah, we're totally going to colonize and no one's going to do anything about it. I
actually appreciate their candor.
I do, too. I think it's better to just say what you really think than to pretend.
I mean, at least she's honest, right? A lot of, you know, Zionists are not honest about what the project of Zionism is, right? That it's fun, that the erasure of Palestinians, that ethnic cleansing, that apartheid, that supremacy are built into the Zionist project. You can't have Zionism without that. You just can't. You can't decide that you are going to have a state in a place already populated with a native indigenous population, and have that state be a supremacy of one ethnicity or religion, right? And not have ethnic cleansing. Those two go hand in hand. It's just impossible. And so, and I think Netanyahu, right? Liberal Zionists like to say, oh, Netanyahu is the extreme. He is the problem. But the reality is that he is the logical product of Zionism. He is exactly what the kind of logical conclusion of this project is. It was always going to end with a Netanyahu.